Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever it's that you are, wherever you may be. Thank you very much for making us a part of your day. I am Brad Franklin, Digital Media Relations Manager here in Chesterfield. Very glad to tell you that Chesterfield Behind the Mic is on the air once again. Now, once again this year, we are rolling through our 5 magisterial districts and talking to the various supervisors who represent the folks from those districts. I'm very happy to have Midlothian District's Dr. Mark Miller, the Vice Chair of the Board of Supervisors, with me today. Dr. Miller, welcome back to the podcast, sir. How are you?
Hey, Brad, I'm doing well. It's nice to see you. It's nice to sit down with you again.
Yeah, absolutely. I really appreciate your time. Definitely appreciate you being willing to sit with me again and talk a little bit about sort of what's going on in Midlothian and some of those things. Before we get started, I wanted to ask you a question. I know it's been a busy year since you were last with us. How would you kind of describe this last year and your experience as vice chair so far on the Board of Supervisors? Besides
being very busy. It's one of those things where it's such a privilege to do this kind of work. And to be reelected as vice chair is such an incredible honor.
Right.
And it shows that perhaps I'm on the right path of what it is to being able to do this job well. I kind of joke around and say sometimes like the worst thing that could possibly happen is I actually learned how to do the job. There's just so much moving parts, and to be able to understand everything that's going on, it takes time. It's a learning curve,
right? And
at the same, going through the process, it's a process.
You mentioned the meetings, and I'm always curious when I talk to the various supervisors about just the time commitment. How does that compare with what you thought it would be before you started? You couldn't have had
they say it's a part-time job. Let me just tell you with a great deal of confidence, it is not. I think when we figured it out, I was looking at, how much we get paid and stuff like that. It comes down to $1.44 an hour. So it's a full-time job. It really is something though that it has to be. It's not just hard work; it's heart work.
That's fair.
Meaning that I need to be the Board of Supervisors, the kind of work that we do comes from a whole different place of love for the community, love for the people we work with, and what's best. Yeah. That's what it's about. And so, it's a full-time gig.
Yeah, I hear that. Well, speaking of full-time gigs, let's talk a little bit about, I always like to start in the county topics and sort of work my way down. Let's talk a little bit about sort of the budget for this year. Given the time frame of when we're recording this, it's currently February the 25th as we sit here today. So we're just a little bit of time here before next couple of weeks. We'll have the budget proposal. We'll have the sort of presentation to the board, as well as the media briefing and that kind of thing. I'm just curious to get your point of view on what things you think will be key during this budget cycle.
Being key. The way I've always looked at things is that I have my hierarchy of needs, very similar to Abraham Maslow. I'm trained as a psychologist, so I'm always thinking through that lens.
Right.
So when looking at the hierarchy of needs, we got that very quickly as we went into the new year with what was happening in Richmond and with water and all those kind of things. So I'm so proud of what the vision has been for previous supervisors, in that they knew that these are the priorities. We need to make sure that we have water. So just credit to utilities to know when it was time to say, okay, we need to take care of Chesterfield and flip that switch. So for me, I always say that I think about fresh air and fresh water, and then I start thinking about public safety. So I'm always thinking about fire, EMS, sheriff, police, and we need to make sure that our teachers also are all paid and our staff are paid in a way that is fair. I worked for Chesterfield Mental Health for 13 years, and to be quite honest with you, part of the reason why I left was, and I was named Employee of the Year and loved the job, but I was just being underpaid. And so there's such competition with Henrico, with Richmond, with Hanover, with Goochland. If you just walk around the Chesterfield Town Center and there are these big directory boards, but there's like, hey, Chesterfield, go work for Henrico. So we need to make sure we keep our talent. And that, for me, the budget is about talent. And I define talent as folks that are passionate for what they're doing and are dependable. If they do those two things, then they're a really good fit often for Chesterfield, and we need to keep those individuals.
Now, this is the first time I've had a chance to talk to you since the Commonwealth Fusion announcement was made, since we heard, at least those of us in the public, those of us on the outside of those negotiations and those conversations had a chance to sort of understand, what was really involved in that project and what the EDA and the folks from Commonwealth Fusion were putting together. I know economic development is important, but this one seems, to me at least, it seems especially so. So why do you feel like this project is such a boon for Chesterfield County?
Well, let's begin and recognize that being the supervisor for Midlothian, Midlothian is the site of the first commercial coal mine in this hemisphere. And now we have a situation with the first commercial fusion plant in Chesterfield County. Yeah. And I mentioned that during the first closed-door session. I don't know if I should bring up what I was saying during a closed-door session, but I think this is safe. And I don't think that they had made the connection that not only was this the first commercial coal mine, but the first commercial fusion plant. And so it kind of puts things in context as far as history is concerned. The other part of it is that, honestly, truly, a fusion plant is the holy grail when it comes to electricity generation and power generation. Yeah. And they looked nationwide for a site, and I kind of joke around as I'm sure they were working with some private consultant, and they went all the way around and looked at all the other places, and at the end they said, well, let me just take you all to Chesterfield. Right. And that's what they did. I have a private consultant right now. It's probably upset with me. But the truth is that when they arrived here, it just made sense where it was, what we were going to be able to do, and it just, talk about a good fit. Yeah. And big companies like Lego and others have said, you know what, Chesterfield's home. Right.
And I know from the EDA side of things, there's a lot of things that the EDA does. For folks who have not checked it out, make sure you give a look to Jim McConnell's 3-part series on the EDA and sort of how that group does the work it does for the county. And how the structure works and sort of the ins and outs of all the particulars there. As we sort of transition to the sort of district-specific topics, I wanted to start with development because, again, I know that that's extremely important and something that, is near and dear to a lot of people's hearts out in the county. Folks that probably, as members of the Board of Supervisors, you all hear about pretty regularly. I'm curious to get your point of view on the balance there as you try to weigh the types of things that are coming against, or maybe the things that have been maybe passed in the past, right? Things that have not come out of the ground yet, but have been approved, versus the things that are now coming across sort of the radar. How would you how do you balance the past and what isn't real yet versus what could be real in the future?
It's a great question. I want to kind of define development for a moment as far as we're talking about residential development. We may be talking about development from a commercial perspective also. And I want to say specifically when I'm saying commercial, I'm talking about bringing small business into the community. So I'm thinking about what's going to happen with Chesterfield Town Center, what's going to happen with Sycamore Square, all these kind of things. So I hate seeing storefronts closed. And especially because that when people come into the community and they see that, then they're wondering about the economic health of the community. That being said, from a residential perspective, it's so important that we are able to create the kind of housing that is needed in the area and at the same time not overwhelm the services. Every once in a while I'll get an email, I'm kind of joking, daily, I get an email that'll say something like, all this development is going on, why do we need to raise taxes or whatever that is? And we haven't raised taxes, but of course, real estate has gone up and stuff like that. And I don't think that people are kind of getting the concept that, yes, we could go through a whole bunch of development, but it's a zero-sum game. Because the minute that you put in more development, then you need more police. You need the infrastructure that is going to be there. That being said, you're right. Prior to me being elected, 13,000 homes, townhomes, condominiums, apartments, all that was already approved, but hadn't even come out of the ground. So when I was elected in a special election a couple of years ago, that was my first question. Is like, okay, what do we have in front of us so I can get a feel for how to move forward? Because it has been explosive growth, especially in the Midlothian area. So when I am looking at projects, I am looking at, okay, how is it going to add to the community? How is it going to enhance the community, and does it make sense? And really, that's what it comes down to.
Right.
I want to make sure really clear about this. I don't have aspirations of being a delegate or a senator. I want to be your Midlothian supervisor, which means that my focus is always toward what's best for the community, and that's what I keep an eye on. I get emails again fairly regularly saying, "Well, the developers have been running Chesterfield County," and maybe that has happened in the past. I mean, that's up for debate. But for me, I have a very different relationship with the developers, and it's one in which I'm not against development. What I am for is what makes sense. Unbridled growth isn't going to help anybody. What is what are the things that are going to be helpful? So North Halsley is a really nice residential program, development that I was planning that looks like a good program, a good place to go. But at the same time, I wanted to make sure that the roundabout was in place and construction or traffic.
Because those details really matter.
They really do. And I do get into the details and making sure that that's happening. And that's the same thing. Like there's going to be a Whole Foods that I approve that's going to be coming in. And folks are excited about that. And so how is it enhancing the community?
I can definitely understand that. On the transportation front, I feel like these topics are always something that is good for the Supervisor podcasts and the check-ins that we do each year, because it feels like there are always things, the kinds of things that folks are curious to hear more about. I know in Midlothian that's obviously the case here. What are some of the things that are standing out as far as transportation goes, in your opinion? And I know there are some situations in traffic-related things that you wanted to talk about, right?
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, as we've grown, the traffic, the congestion, all those things have increased. There are certain points in Midlothian District that folks just need to be very careful. Because I just was driving up Midlothian Turnpike yesterday. I got off at Chippenham and was heading up toward the library, and there was an accident on Midlothian. What I'm hearing from my police is to stop following so close. Give yourself some space, so if someone stops quickly, you're not going to go ramming into someone. I mean, that's the kind of stuff. And and honestly, truly, pay attention to the speed limit. Pay attention to the conditions. Pay attention to slowing down. I recognize that roundabouts are confusing at times, so just be careful as you're doing that. Come to a full four-way stop. Make sure that you come to a complete stop. You know you've come to a complete stop when the car kind of backs up a little bit. Then you know you've come to a complete stop. The standard joke that a stop sign that has a white border on it is optional. It's not true. And that you just need to be so much more careful. And at the same time, my responsibilities are making sure that whatever pace we continue to grow, that we're working closely with VDOT. Remember, VDOT owns the roads. We don't own the roads. They're responsible for the upkeep. And folks misunderstand that. I get a lot of emails around, you need to fix a pothole somewhere. And so, okay, reach out to VDOT. And I will too.
I know that, in speaking about, I know VDOT owns the roads, but I know, our transportation folks, Chessa and even Jesse, at the county administration level, those speed cushions obviously are a big focal point for a lot of folks in a lot of various portions around the county. I know in Midlothian, speed cushions have been something that I think that have come on more, I guess, I don't want to say more regularly. I don't know if that's the right terminology, but basically they're more prevalent, I guess, as we go forward. Can you talk a little bit about sort of what the speed cushions mean to folks in your district? Because I know that's something that you've had some experience with.
Well, no doubt. I mean, speed cushions, whenever I was elected, was one of the things that I was pursuing, and I'm appreciating Chessa and Jesse in working that way to set up some sort of a system so that we can move forward. It needs to be in conjunction with VDOT, but some of the challenges has been, for instance, on Pinetta. There's been a lot of accidents, a lot of pullover, a lot of people speeding. It's straight, it's going down a hill, all those things, and it's really residential, and we need to slow down there. So in conjunction with the community, we'll work closely to be able to identify up to 10 speed cushions that'll be between, I guess it's Beaufort and Midlothian. But again, it's going to be with the community's input to make sure what makes sense.
Now, before we leave transportation completely, I want to talk about, there were a couple of, there's a roundabout coming, I think at Alverser and Old Buckingham. There was a traffic light coming at Tarrington. And then I think at Busy Street, there was a left-hand turn out of Courthouse that I think was pretty challenging for folks. I know those three were things that were sort of on the radar. Any updates on any of those three projects from your point of view, or why they are so important, in kind of moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, the four-way at Old Buckingham and Alversor has been just yesterday someone came to me and said people just go right through it as if the stopping sign isn't even there.
Right.
And so that is going to be a roundabout there, and the funding is there. And if you go out there, you're going to see there's some flags. So they're already starting to think about, okay, here we are. We're going to start to move forward on it. It's going to take a little while. We got to do the engineering, and then of course, but you'll notice if folks have been around there, they know that gas lines have been moved. The infrastructure has been changed around to be able to handle that. Over at Tarrington, that we're very excited about that. That was one of my initial challenges was to make sure that got put into place. That light right there, that when you're exiting Tarrington, just for safety, coming down Robius, it's a challenge. And so now we're moving forward. I'm hoping by the end of the year that'll be in place.
Oh, great. Cool. And then anything on that left hand, the one at Busy Street, anything on that?
So if you folks know this, over where Burlington or where Bed Bath & Beyond was, it's tough to get out of that strip mall, especially when you're making a left-hand turn on the courthouse. If you're coming straight on where Burlington is now, making that left-hand turn is really a challenge. So the hope is that instead of making that left, you'll make a right-hand turn, go down one block to Busy Street and come around that way. That's already, I think that's been funded at this point. It's just a matter of being able to, there's a couple businesses there, so we need to decide and help them what they're going to do. But I'd love to see that put in. So then you come around, it's a big circle, and then you go up to Midlothian and you can make a left-hand turn if you want to.
Good deal.
Thank you.
Now, from the capital side of things, and maybe I'm going to use capital a little bit in quotations there, because we're not necessarily just talking about sort of brick and mortar capital. There's also sort of the sort of long-term idea of different things, and maybe that sort of applies to capital. But I like to check on a few things on that side for Midlothian. I know there's a turf field, I think, at James River. There's obviously there's some tennis courts there as well that need some attention. But just in that sort of vein, what are some of the things from the capital side, or so maybe that long-term planning side of things that you've got your eye on for the district?
Well, you brought up two very important projects that need to be done. One is the turf field over at James River. The tennis courts over there need to be replaced. And I mean, when I was elected, folks were coming to me and saying, hey, what is the process, or just checking and making sure that these things are being maintained? And there hasn't been a real clean process for that. And so I asked folks at Parks and Rec to be able to identify, okay, what is the process, the system to see how we go about maintaining and making sure that we're putting all this capital improvement in. And folks, it's a lot of money to do this. And so it's your money. So we're responsible for good stewards of your money. And so we've kind of started to revamp that process. Instead of the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing necessarily. I'd like to see Parks and Rec take it over on things that are outside of the school. That way we know that we have someone or one organization or one part of the county that's responsible for doing that.
And then I also know that what was the water sewer situation at there was a concession stand. I think it was at
in Midlothian. You are well informed. So what's happening over at Midlothian High School is that you have the softball and the baseball fields that are out there, and so right now there are porta potties that are out there, and I mean we're talking about a $15 million project to bring the water out there, bring the sewer out there, build a concession stand, and bring that to where it needs to be, and it's a lot of money. I mean, $15 million. It'll have to be done over a decade to make sure that it's done. But it's those are the kind of things that I'm not sure if people recognize or realize unless you're living it every day. And I have the distinct honor of getting those emails because everyone has their priorities.
Exactly.
What is and legitimately so. And how do we measure and weigh that and do it in a good way? Chesterfield has a great track record on just making sure that we are good stewards of the money, that we have highly rated as far as when we're going for loans and things things like that when we're doing bonds,
right.
Which is not true for all the localities around us without mentioning names.
Well, I'll get you out of here on this question, as I did with Mr. England, will with your fellow board members as we go forward. What are some of the challenges that you see facing both the county and your district specifically going in deeper as we go into 2025?
It's a great question. I mean, there's a lot going on right now on the federal level that brings some uncertainty to how things are going to unfold. That being said, whenever we're figuring out the budget, we're trying to look into our crystal ball 18 months from now as to where things are going to be financially. That's why it's so important that we be physically conservative or fiscally conservative to ensure that when we're deciding what the rate is going to be, those kind of things, that we're taking care of that. At the same time, it's going back to the capital improvement. It's risk management.
Oh, that's such a good way to look at it.
I mean, it's one of those things where it's almost, we can make the investments now so someone doesn't twist an ankle on a field and then we get into a whole situation around that. We just need to make sure that we're maintaining, but at the same time, I mean, folks are considerably frustrated. I get it around how much, me too, on how much our real estate assessments have gone up as much as they have. A lot of that money has gone to things like capital improvement and making sure that we're paying our talent to stick around. And if we don't, then we're it becomes one of those things we just need to be careful and make sure that we are doing what we can do best for our folks.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Miller, thank you very much for your time. Again, I really appreciate you coming on the show, talking to us about some things going on in Midlothian. Really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much.
All right. Make sure you check us out on social media. On Twitter, it's at Chesterfield VA, and on Instagram, it's Chesterfield Virginia, one word. And on Facebook, you can check out our podcast page. Just search Chesterfield Behind the Mic. Now, make sure to follow or subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Overcast, or wherever it is that your shows are sold. And if you're so inclined to give us a rating or review, we greatly appreciate it. As always, the video version of our show is available on our YouTube channel as well as on our website at Chesterfield.gov/podcast. That's also where you can submit feedback anytime, make a suggestion, or just reach out to us. You can watch the show on WCCT Thursday through Sunday at 7. The weekends at noon. That is Comcast Channel 98, Verizon Channel 28. Lastly, check out Chesterfield.gov/connect us to find out a number of other ways to connect with Chesterfield County. My thanks to my director, Martin Stith, my executive producer, Teresa, Bonifas, and all the good folks from Constituent Media Services for all they do. And my thanks to you for joining us today. So from all of us here in Chesterfield, thanks again for making us a part of your day. We'll see you again real soon. Take good care.
From blogs to podcasts, and I'm very glad to tell you that Chesterfield Behind the Mic is on the air once again.
Weekly video segments and newsletters,
social media, the latest community news.
And this is your Chesterfield News Minute for September 19th.
How to get in touch, and everything in between. If you want to know about Chesterfield County, our Connect With Us webpage has you covered. Chesterfield.gov/connect with us. Connect with us, your source for all things Chesterfield.